And we are now live. Tyler Measom, welcome to Utah Valley University. Ladies and gentlemen, why don't you give an honest liar a big hand? We've got about... Yeah. They love you here. They love you here in Orem.
That's my alma mater, Duane. I went to UVU.
Tyler Measom is alumnus.
It was UVCC when I went there. So,
and we are waiting on. Justin said that when he's back, he'll just kind of grab the link and jump in. So that may happen, it may not. Okay. Thanks for doing that. It's such a great film. I've seen it. Not only have I seen it in its final form like a dozen times now, but I saw it while it was being edited.
Well, you saw it while it was being shot, so yeah, let's not forget that.
Yes. So what we're going to do, this is just a Q&A. I'm going to ask you some questions, questions that I may or may not know the answer to, but, we'll play along. And then we'll bring people up here. Please be thinking of your questions for this gentleman who's giving us his time and is really great at answering student questions. It's one of his many strengths, many talents.
Write the questions in an envelope, and I'll try to read them through the envelope.
That'll lead right into my first question. So, what was your interest in magic and in James Randi or skepticism before going into this project?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I had a big interest in magic. I mean, I think everybody likes magic a little bit. We all like the joy of the tricks, but I didn't have any more of an interest than anyone else. After I had done Sons of Perdition, I was looking for the next film I wanted to do, and I wanted to do something big and grand and interesting. And a friend of mine mentioned James Randi and said he'd make a great documentary. And I did about 30 minutes of research before I realized that he would make an amazing story. I reached out to them, the James Randi Educational Foundation, and they properly vetted me. And then they said, yeah, we want you to make the film. And that was June of 2010? 2011.
So what do you mean by properly vetting you?
Well, I mean, Randi gets a lot of crackpots who want to bring him down. They want to investigate him. So, of course, they want to see if I was someone who was legit, as a legitimate filmmaker. I sent Randi a copy of my film, Sons of Perdition, and he liked it. He loved it. And so he said, let's do it. I flew down to Fort Lauderdale, where he is based. He lives. And we went to lunch. He took me to IKEA because he likes the meatballs there, which is strange.
Him and my parents too. So.
And then he said, I will do this film under one condition. And he paused for dramatic effect, as James Randi is prone to do. And I thought in my head, like, oh, he wants to look taller, or he doesn't want us to say something, or he wants to be shot from the left side. Who knows? And he said, warts and all. I want you to show warts and all. Anything that's bad, anything that's good, I want you to show it. And we remembered that, and we held it to him in some ways. That, Randi, you said warts and all. And as you can see from the film, we did reveal some things that may have been bad in Randi's life.
So when Justin does the interview there at the end with him, and when he says, now we've talked about this, is that what he's referring to? Is the sort of warts and all, or?
No, he was referring to, we talked about, did you know that Davey was Jose, or Jose was Davey? And he continually kind of flirted around the topic and the subject quite a bit.
Can you tell me then about, or tell them, because I know, as if I don't know, can you tell me, Tyler, about the decision to use that material? Because you didn't even know about it, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, and you know, when you're making a film, there's so much editing and there's so much shooting and there's so much material. And when we were shooting, you know, we had not only the stuff we shot with James Randi, but we had hundreds of hours of archival tapes and boxes full of old VHS tapes of Randy's appearances and small television channels, and That's Incredible and whatever. So there was just so much to go through. And you remember, Duane, you were a part of like compiling it, putting it all together. It was just so much material. And Justin and I were partners on the film, and anyone making a documentary, I always think it's such a good idea to partner with somebody else, even if you're co-directing, because, you know, it allows you to kind of, one person can shoot and the other person can direct and produce, and then the other person can produce and shoot, and one person can go to Florida while you can't, or whatever it may be. Also, I think it just helps to have a cheerleader at all times, you know, like, because it's such a long, exhausting process that at some point you're going to be tired and they're going to say, get up and let's complete this movie. Regardless, on that time, Justin went down and shot Randi, and I had no idea the footage existed. I didn't know. And our editor, Greg O'Toole, and again, I mean, the footage is kind of a throwaway footage anyways. It's not pretty. It's just Justin holding the camera next to him, you know, kind of having a conversation. And it wasn't transcribed. It wasn't looked at. Our editor said he found it and put it in the film, a rough cut. And I'm watching the rough cut, and it hit me like a brick. I mean, it really, the first time I saw it, I felt a little sick to my stomach for a number of reasons. And I knew then that we had to try and keep it, because if it had that effect on me, it would surely or hopefully have the same effect on the audience.
Cool. So let me ask you this. I'm trying to come up with questions I've never asked you before that. So how did making this movie like affect your life and change your life?
Well, you know, every time you make a film, I hope you can take something from it and learn from it. And I think I learned from Sons of Perdition, my first documentary, I learned patience. You know, I learned, and to any aspiring filmmakers, that you may think that you're going to shoot a film and it's going to take a month or 6 months or a year. It's going to take longer. You're going to be living above the store for a long, long time. And that actually made it a better film, is to hang out for a long time and have patience. I think what I learned with this on a filmmaking aspect, and I can easily say that the craftsmanship of this film was better than my other films. And, you know, I learned the beauty of asking questions and of finding an audience and figuring out what you want your character to say and how you want to say it. But I think the one thing I learned with this is just to never lock down to what you think the story may be, because you never really know. And even if you're making a narrative, when you have a script and you shot it a certain way, you may find yourself telling a different story. We started this film making a film about an old magician, and what we ended up doing was making a love story, essentially, a beautiful love story about another character and his plight. And those are the best stories, the ones where you think it's going to go this way and it turns left, and you are introduced to a new drama and dilemma. And so I think that's what I learned mostly on this. I also learned a few magic tricks. Really bad.
That's right.
Really bad.
I've sat in restaurants with Tyler, and he's done the spoon bending trick too.
Yeah.
But
with my mind, of course.
With his mind. Entirely. We're not even touching the spoons. In fact, he bent the spoons at my house. Do a timeline about when you came on compared to when the revelations about Davey happened, and where were you in the process when that all occurred?
You know, Davey wasn't a part of the film when we first started making it. He was just Randi's partner, and we actually didn't even film him. We didn't shoot him. We didn't really know, he was in the background, and they were a pair. And then when that occurred, and it was probably six to 8 months after we'd started filming. And it was, I'd like to think we're human beings first. So the first thing, it was awful. It was terrible for us. And the second thing is, oh my God, what an amazing story. I can't believe this happened. It was very close second, a very close second. Because, it wasn't that Davey got arrested for, shoplifting. He got arrested for identity theft. He took on the identity of another man so that he could go to Australia and take on the identity of another man. And then we found that footage of him on that show where he was taking the identity of another man, claiming to take on the identity of another man who didn't know his name. I mean, it just like it just went everywhere. And we really were grateful for that. I hasten to say it because it did make the story amazing. But what it did do is it really made it more difficult. It made it more difficult to tell. It made it more difficult to introduce him as a character and keep him as a character, so much so that you want to feel for him at the end. How long do you keep that secret? How long do we keep him around? You know, people who watch it at the first part say, well, I wanted to watch a film about James Randi. Why am I watching his partner? I don't care. Why do I care about him? And then you have to, wait around for the reveal. So it made it very, 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 very difficult in the editing phase. And the last stuff we edited, days before we premiered at Tribeca, was that scene, the Randi scene where he reveals to us or says to us, don't use this.
Cool. Okay. Hey, I'm going to turn it over to people. Come on up. Who's first? All right, here they come. They're just beating each other down, Tyler. They're all being shy, but here they come, because I will beat them down if they don't come up. And they know it. Anyway, hey, always a pleasure. I'll catch you again at the end here. So, say your name.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Lucas.
Hi, Lucas.
I really liked your movie, and I like the story that you told, but said that you shot for like over 8 months. So how did you decide what to use in your final edit and what to not use?
Well, we shot for a lot more than 8 months. It was 8 months when Davey, when the arrest came. We shot for about a year and a half. And how did we decide what to use? I don't think it was so much what we shot that was important, what we used. It was the mass amount of archival footage that we had. That was quite a chore in going through, because there was so much footage, and some of it was so great and some of it had to hit the cutting room floor. So, we just carefully crafted the story before we did most any shooting, or we'd shot for a while and we kind of knew the story we were going to tell, but we planned it out. We researched. We knew the Alpha Project. We knew how it started and ended. We knew Pop Off and how it started and ended. We didn't know how Randi would work. So when we brought in our brilliant editor, Greg O'Toole, we went up to a cabin in Park City for a week, and we locked ourselves in, and just with note cards and films and alcohol. And we just buried it. And we just had note cards. It was a beautiful mind all over the place. Like, we just really figured out what the story was going to be. And then, of course, we threw it all away and went to another story. And it's a very difficult place when you're cutting a documentary, because there's no end. You don't know how it could be. And editors have a brilliant ability to be able to not care about a scene that I may care about. And you can have a scene and you love it and it's amazing and it's a funny scene or it's a cute scene or a heartwarming scene, but you just know for some reason it doesn't work, and you deliberate. And we always had the rule that if when in doubt, throw it out. And if we didn't love it and it didn't work and we couldn't fix it, just throw it out. And it was really hard for me to throw out scenes I loved, but editors just have that ability to go, Apple I, Apple O, delete, and just never look back and never feel for it again. And that's why an editor and a good doc editor is worth their weight in gold. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot to take in when you're actually like in that situation, as opposed to just watching the movie that you made.
Well, I'll tell you this. And I think this goes across the board with filmmaking. If something bothers you, if it bothers you on set and it's a light in the background or it's a way somebody's delivering the line and it kind of bothers you, and you change it. If you have the ability to change it and it doesn't take a ton of time or whatever, fix it. And if you have that same ability, if you're watching in post and you don't like an edit and you just kind of feel that it doesn't work, change it, because one day you're going to see that on the big screen, and that little thing is going to drive you crazy. So we have the ability to change those things, and you have to trust your instinct as a filmmaker and know that you should change that so that you don't hate it later when you're watching it with people who will give it a Rotten Tomato score.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You guys could line up here if you want to do it. So that,
All right. Hello.
Hey.
My name is Skyler. Nice to meet
Skyler.
you. I love the film. That was
Thanks.
awesome. Something I'm curious about is, shooting over a year and a half, what kind of schedule did that look like, and how often were you shooting, and what were the days when you were shooting a lot? I mean, what does that kind of look like?
That's a good question. I love film student questions. They're so different from like film festival questions. Everyone asks the same kind of, how was Randy? Schedule was free-flowing. I mean, we honestly didn't know when we were going to start or when we were going to end or where we were going to shoot. A good majority of the film is interviews. So it was, can we schedule an interview with you at this time? And then we'd run and we'd fly and we'd go pick it up. A lot of times with Randy, it was just a constant state of like checking in, and I hate to say it, but, he's old. And we were afraid that at one point he wouldn't be around. And so we sometimes stepped on the pedal a little bit to try and shoot, knowing that, it'd be an awful film to not have him in it. So it was really just like every once in a while we'd check in. We'd fly down to Florida and see how they're doing, follow him around. We were very lucky to follow James Randi during a year in his life when he was very busy, in that he spoke at the big conference in Washington, D.C. He received an award. He traveled to Europe. His partner was arrested for identity theft. It was a really interesting year to follow him, that it just kind of flowed. What we did do, and I would advise this with anyone who is thinking of making a documentary, is we saved a couple of people for the final interviews. Adam Savage and Jamie Ian Swiss, who the magician. And the reason being is because we had a hard time when the editing from saying, okay, how do we get from this scene to this scene? And so we'd go to Adam Savage, and he's a TV personality. He spoke well, and we'd say, look, Adam, we're having a hard time getting from this scene to this scene. Can you please say Randy did this? And he understood it. He got it. So he was our connection. I did that with Sons of Perdition. We had a hard time describing what polygamy was. So we went and had a guy draw while he was drywalling. He drew on the wall some of the things, and it was a connector to get from A to B, A to C, or Z to Q if we needed to. So that was our schedule, loose, all over the place.
Okay. During that time, I mean, were there big breaks in between a lot of that? And when so, I mean, how was it picking like right back up to the story if that was the case?
Yeah. We also had to, in the middle of it, try and make money and raise funds to continue.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't want to shoot the whole thing all at once. We just knew that hanging around long enough and figuring out the story was better for the film itself. And we were, we'd continually edit a little bit while we were shooting and edit and do some more research. So for the most part, I was on the film full time-ish, give or take, but we were only shooting on and off.
Okay. Awesome. Well, there's more people lined up with questions here.
Bring them.
Well, I'll let someone else. But thank you. And thanks for your
Thanks,
time.
Skyler. Good luck, man.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
I don't know if you can see me, but how do you? I don't know how to move this. Okay, well, I'm Ruby. Nice to meet you, Tyler.
What is it?
Ruby.
Hi, Ruby.
I'm on my tippy toes, by the way. But I was curious to know, what have been some of the biggest difficulties you've had to face throughout the years, and how did you learn to overcome them or look past them?
In my filmmaking career and my personal life.
In filmmaking.
Those are two different conversations.
In your filmmaking career.
Well, I'll tell you, and you'll deal with this when you're making your first film, in that when you're trying to convince someone to be a part of your film, whether you're telling an actor or a DP, or you're trying to raise money, you're trying to convince an investor or a broadcaster, I'm sorry to tell you, but they don't think you're going to make the film. They don't. They don't think you're going to do it. And it's your job to convince them. And it's very difficult to convince them that you're not one of the hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of people that have an idea for a film that it's never going to get done. So it's difficult to get past that hump and to believe in yourself when, frankly, few will. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to get past the continuous no's. You will get no's. You will get no's. You will get yeses that turn out to be no's. You will get maybes that are surely no's, and you will get yeses that aren't yeses at all. And it's really hard to contain and know that you're going to make that movie, because at some point you're going to get a yes that will change your life. But it's always important to remember that your first film, you're continually trying to convince those people that you can make the movie. The next film, you don't have to do that. You've made a movie. You don't have to say, I can start, work, and finish a film. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is say, I've made a film. This is the film I want to make now. Okay. So just know that once you make that first one, it gets easier. But the difficulty of convincing them that you want to make a movie the first time amongst the throng that already have, it's difficult.
Okay. That's great. Was there any more difficulties you feel like were just kind of hard to overcome, but you went through it?
I mean, it's difficult to sometimes make a continual living as a full-time filmmaker. Mm-hmm. It's very important to be able to branch out. There's a handful of people that can make a living as a full-time documentary filmmaker or independent filmmaker. So what you do is you learn how to teach, or you learn how to shoot, or you learn how to edit, or you direct commercials, because to be able to just make a film is very difficult sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Welcome. Good luck.
That helped a lot. So thanks.
Oh, I'm a little taller. Okay. Cool. Hi, Tyler. I'm Brandon.
Hey, Brandon.
My question was mostly thinking about Uri and how you got the interview with him. I was wondering if he knew that he was going to be basically a villain in your movie, and what you did to prep him to get him to talk to you, or I guess say what he needed to say to help you push the story along.
Be sure to say who made that first contact.
What did he say?
He said, be sure to say who made that first contact. That's what Duane said.
Oh, you did contact the lawyer, didn't you, Duane?
I did.
Yeah. We went back and forth on whether we were going to put Uri Geller in it. For every good superhero, has to have a villain. For every Superman, there's a Lex Luthor. And that villain has to have, in many ways, the same powers. Mm-hmm. They just use them for a different reason. And Randi's arch nemesis was Uri Geller. I mean, Randi could beat Peter Popoff. He can beat the Alpha Projects. He can beat guys on That's Incredible who blow pages, but he could never beat Uri Geller. So we knew at some point that we had to put Uri Geller in the film. Uri Geller is grateful for James Randi because James Randi made him a bigger celebrity, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. We'd look at this old footage and these old tapes, and we'd see Uri Geller on a TV show, and Randi would record it. We had all of Randi's VHS tapes, so he'd record it, and then like 4 days later, we'd have a VHS tape of Randi on that same show showing how he did it. So Randi was continually like chasing him. Yeah. So we knew we had to put him in the film, and we knew that he would probably not like it because we're making a film about James Randi, and he was his nemesis. They hate each other. Maybe. I don't think Randi likes him. So Duane wrote his lawyer. He wrote Uri Geller a letter, an email, and his lawyer responded and said, as you know, Mr. Geller and Mr. Randi have had a very litigious relationship, et cetera, et cetera. We'd like to know in advance all of the questions you're going to ask Mr. Geller. And of course, I wanted to say, if he was a psychic, he'd know.
He's a mystifier.
I actually started to type up all the questions, and then I remembered something that Randi said, which was the most dangerous place to be is between Uri Geller and a camera, because he wants to be on the screen. He wants to be on TV. He wants to be in front of a camera. So in response to that email, I basically just said, you know what? Don't worry about it. We've got lots of people talking about Uri Geller. We've got a lot of old footage of him. We don't really need him in the film. About 5 minutes later, he literally called. He called me. I don't know how he got my number. Maybe he is a little bit psychic. But he called and said, no, please come out. Please come to England and interview. So we interviewed him, and he knew what he was getting into. Okay. I haven't heard what he thinks about the film, but I suspect he's happy that he was in it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you.
I think it was important for us to get kind of a counter person. We never wanted to make a sloppy wet kiss to James Randi. So we wanted to show, what the other side thinks.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Hello there, Tyler.
How you doing, man?
My name is Ricardo, and I have there was a point in your film that just broke my heart. It was when the guys that are trying to prove that the Alpha Kids were real,
mm-hmm.
and they were filming them all day. And at the end, as soon as they turn off the cameras, they bend everything.
Right.
And he has a nervous breakdown. His head hurts. He just can't take it anymore, right? My question to you as a filmmaker is, how do you know when to stop filming?
Like me personally, as a documentary filmmaker?
Yeah, when do you decide to turn off the camera?
Before I go into any film and with any subject, I let them know, if there's something you don't want me to film, I will turn it off. If you say turn the cameras off, I will do it. I'm not TMZ. I don't want to do that. Gaining somebody's trust as a documentary filmmaker is the most important thing you can do. And it's not easy. It takes a while. And I am taking a man's existence, his 86 years of work, in my hands. And I can do whatever the hell I wanted to it. I could make him look like a villain. I could make him look like a moron. And to trust basically a stranger with that takes a lot of guts. And I want to make sure that I'm loyal and treat my subjects fairly. So if they ask, I'll turn it off. But otherwise, I'll shoot what I can and figure it out later, edit it later. I mean, Sons of Perdition was probably more difficult in deciding when to leave the camera on and off. I mean, I was seeing pure heartbreak and sadness and despair and crimes being committed. I mean, hell, I broke a crime on that film. So that was probably more difficult than An Honest Liar, turning the cameras off for that.
And if I could also ask you...
before you do, though, I would say, look, it's the same thing. Like, if you feel like you're doing something wrong when you're shooting, if you feel like I shouldn't be capturing this person's anguish or pain or suffering right now, I don't feel good about what I'm doing, turn it off. Turn it off and feel better about yourself. Listen to who you are as a human being. It'll make you a better filmmaker, if nothing else. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please. But just when you're interviewing someone, how do you foster atmosphere of familiarity and comfort?
The majority of the people in An Honest Liar were entertainers. It's not hard to interview Penn and Teller. They've been interviewed 1 million times. So for them, in some ways, it was almost a negative, because for them, it's just another interview and more questions, and then we do another interview. So, but other people, they're not used to being on camera. I've found with people who aren't used to being on camera, and this also includes all the other interviews I've done and all the other shooting I've done and all the other story, I've done a lot of story producing on other people's docs. I find, and this is my own flavor, the less is the better. Like I prefer just a small camera, and not a boom pole and not a sit down organized if I can. I kind of like it to feel natural. The more it feels like a movie, the more they kind of clam up in a way. James Randi, well, for the majority of the film, he was the amazing Randi. He was telling jokes, and he was on stage, and he was wacky, and he was funny, and he knew the camera was there. But there were only 2 times when he was James Randi, and he showed his emotions, and he showed his sadness and his pain. When you go to someone's house the first time, they clean up, they sweep the floors, they put out cookies. You go over there the 20th time, they don't care. And that's where you need to be as a filmmaker. You need to be in a place where they feel so comfortable with you that they're able to forget that you're a filmmaker in some aspects. How you foster that with sitting down with an interview for someone, you have to work a lot quicker. You have to be friendly. You have to assure them that you're not there to steal their story. You have to make them feel like they're a part of it. Like you're not in charge, that they're a part of the filmmaking process. And I'll say that in a grand scale as well. Anyone, you have to make them feel like they're a part of the filmmaking process, whether they're giving you $1 million for your film, or they're giving you $5 on Kickstarter, or you're interviewing them. You're not there to take their story. They're a part of your filmmaking process and the storytelling and the movie making altogether. So that's kind of how you make you feel. You're not there to take, you're there to share. Whew, that was all over the place, wasn't it?
Thank you so much for sharing your insight.
You're welcome. Good luck. Now I'm drinking wine.
Hey, I'm Sterling.
Hey, Sterling.
I just have a couple questions for you. One was, I kind of noticed that throughout this story, you're constantly talking about magic, and you're showing his tricks, and you're showing all the footage of what they're doing on the shows and everything. But you never gave any explanation, right, for anything that was happening. And I was just curious if you had footage of where they kind of explain their tricks and you consciously chose not to let that be part of the movie, or what was your rationale there?
We did. We consciously made a decision, and it was a heavily discussed decision to not reveal the magic tricks, especially in places like the Alpha Project, where they talk about how they made the rotor move. They do explain in the interview how they did it, but we cut it out. We just wanted to keep as many secrets as we can, and then we were allowed to, without ruining the story. My personal opinion with filmmaking is that's the most important part. How long can you keep a secret until you absolutely have to reveal it in order for the audience to move on? And we wanted to keep those secrets, also just to keep up the magician's code. But I'll tell you how they did it.
Yeah,
there was a rotor, and it was on a piece of wood, and it had a little groove in the piece of wood, and the glass set on top of it, and then the rotor was in the middle with a spindle. And they wanted to change out the rotor, so they took the top off, and then they put a little piece of paper, a little balled up piece of aluminum foil in the groove, set it back down, and blew. So the wind went down and around and inside the cylinder. I mean, there was all kinds of crazy things that those guys did. They were things we couldn't even include. There was one where there's one moment in the film where he's messing with a camera, and they have the camera on him, and a flash of light comes up. Well, that's nothing more than the guy, Banachek, and he does this. He goes up to the camera, and meanwhile this hand, goes around and just presses buttons on the camera. So they can't see that. They can only see, and he just presses buttons, and one of the buttons makes it flash. They were given still cameras, and they were told to go out and take photos and see if and conjure up psychic images. And then they developed the photos that these psychics took, and in the frame was mushroom clouds and pregnant women and the Virgin Mary and all kinds of stuff. And they thought they affected the photography. Well, no, they spit on the lens. They literally just spit on the lens and rubbed it in a little bit, and it created different images. So they thought fast on their feet, and they were pretty creative, and they kept a secret. The thing that I'm most inspired by mad magicians is two things. One, the pre-production, the planning, the thinking something through for the long haul, to be able to carry a spare card in their breast pocket just in case they have to pull a magic trick, and also to keep a secret. They keep secrets, and that's kind of what we tried to do with our film.
Yeah, no, I think it was a great decision to withhold it. But one of my favorite sequences was also the televangelist, when it was like almost like it became like a heist movie, and they broke down how he did his thing and stuff. That was really cool.
Totally. We tried to make that very like Ocean's 11.
That's what it felt like. Yeah.
Yeah. What you don't know is that, you know, that it just showed like one incident, but Randy followed him around the country. I mean, Randy went to city after city, and Randy actually had a guy, and he's in the film being healed in one of the archival clips. He was a plant, and Randy actually had him dress up as a woman, and say that he had uterine cancer, and Popoff healed him of uterine cancer. So Randy just like, you know, he wanted conclusive proof that this guy was a fraud.
My one other question for you is, since this whole movie is about fraud, deception, and all these things and the mysteries, how much did you trust your own subjects? How much do you believe now that you've made this movie of everything they told you?
You know, there's an element where I kind of like the untrusting narrator. What's that called, Duane?
I don't know.
You know, the narrator who may pull a fast one on you. And I think there's something that's nice about that. Look, we pulled a fast one on you. We used the theme of documentary and the trust that you have in a documentary to make you question documentaries and the documentary you were watching yourself. So we did the same thing that magicians do in many ways. Be careful what kind of news you're reading, films you're watching.
I am going to ask you one more question. I know I'm like pushing my limit here and then I'm going to leave, but you were talking earlier about funding and stuff, and I was just curious, making this documentary over such a long period of time, did you give yourself any kind of a fixed budget and kind of where you were pulling, you know, your funding from?
Yeah, we had a when you set a budget for a film, you ideally want it to be a big budget, but you also set a budget that encompasses being able to get it done, being able to make your money back on it, so that you know, you make a $20 million documentary, you're not going to see a penny back. And also in there somewhere is to be able to pay yourself at least a little bit so that you can survive while you're making the film. So we raise money through so many different ways, from donations to pre-sales to investors. We did a Kickstarter campaign, a very successful one that raised $250,000. That was very difficult, a lot of work. So we kind of got it from everywhere. And the budget, we pretty much stuck to the budget that we set early in the process of making the film.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time.
You bet, brother.
I think we have one more, Tyler.
Okay.
Coming off from that.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Kinsey,
Hi, Kinsey.
and my question is, how do you get good B-roll?
Ooh. Well, the B-roll encompasses a lot. it depends what you're shooting and what you're filming. I will tell you this: you can never have too much B-roll. Even if you have too much, you won't have enough. I think what's important about B-roll is not just shooting any B-roll. It's about shooting B-roll that will fit within the story itself. I think more important than B-roll, though, is coverage. And there's a difference between B-roll and coverage, and Duane can go over that when he teaches you. But B-roll is, I think B-roll can be used as a crutch in many ways. Like, I think, you can have an interview and you cut to a shot of a clock on the wall. That's not B-roll. That's not sufficient B-roll. Coverage is when two people are talking and you quickly get a shot of the person listening, or you quickly get a shot of the hands so that you can cut that scene together. When you're shooting documentary, you have to think like an editor. You have to think, and I will say this, you have to think like a narrative filmmaker. Everyone thinks that documentary is over here and narrative is over here, and they don't meet. To be a good documentary filmmaker, you really have to know how a scene works in a narrative film. Do I get a B-roll shot? Do I open the scene with the exterior of the house, and then I get a wide shot of the person sitting, and then I get close-up of the hands, and then I get them talking? Build that scene, and then I get a shot of the window with the rain coming down, or whatever it may be. Think of each time you're shooting something, think, how would I film this scene if I were a narrative filmmaker? How would I come into this scene? How would I go out of this scene? And how would I cut away? And would I do a medium, a wide, or a close? So always think like that. Look, Michael Moore says it. He hates when people call documentary filmmakers, or documentarians. They're filmmakers. We make films. And we tell a story with the same model and mode that narrative filmmakers do. And as you're seeing it now, you're seeing narrative filmmakers try and make films that look more like documentaries, and you're making documentary filmmakers try and make films that look more like narratives. And they're starting to blend and blur, and they're starting to become hybrids where they're back and forth. And so always remember what kind of shot and lens and style and movement you're doing when you're shooting a documentary. Start with a theme and maintain it in a documentary as much as you can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, sir.
Yes, sir.
That was a good bunch of questions, huh?
Yeah, it was. By the way, in case you guys don't know, Duane was a very important part of this film. He came on, and he really was. I mean, he found great interviews. He helped from putting together the production to making sure that it got finished in time to when we premiered at Tribeca. He was there and helped put the party together. He was a very important part of it, and he did everything one could ask as a producer, which was everything. That's what it was.
Gee shucks. Well, I want to ask one last question before we give you final applause. You mentioned Sons of Perdition a few times, but I didn't really preface that at all. Can you tell us really quick what that was, and then tell us what you've got going on now?
Sure. Sons of Perdition was a film I made that followed 3 kids who were kicked out of polygamy, the Warren Jeffs group. And we followed these boys for 2.5 years. And if you know anything about the FLDS, the Warren Jeffs community, these boys were cut off from the outside world. They had no TV, no radio, no music, no books, very, very little education. And then one day at a very young age of 15, 16, or 17, they were kicked out, completely thrown out of the community and forced to fend for themselves. And we followed them through this process and got to know them and became a part of their lives. And in the process, we told the story of Warren Jeffs and how women are treated in there. And much like An Honest Liar, things happened that made the film better and took it in a new direction and made the film a little more real and a little more scary in some ways. So that film was, it premiered at Tribeca as well. and then it played on the Oprah Winfrey Network. It was on Netflix, but its 3-year run just expired, so it's now on Amazon and Hulu, or iTunes as well.
Okay, and what's next?
Well, right now I'm in the middle of a big film about MTV, the birth, rise, and cultural effects of MTV. It's kind of a pseudo pop culture documentary, very different from what I've done, but a very interesting film nonetheless. And then other projects here and there I'm trying to get off the ground, and commercials and story producing for other people's projects, and whatever. We're all coin operated.
Yep. All right, man. Hey, let's give Tyler a big round of applause.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for stepping in and doing a great job.
No worries. Good luck, everyone. Stick to it. Don't give up.
Hey, and I'm seeing here, hold on just a sec. I'm going to stop the broadcast.